Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Spencer Haggstrom, and I'm going to share a topic that I found deeply meaningful for my final media presentation. The topic that I've chosen is Jordan's Principle, as it's rooted in a powerful story of injustice and love, and has huge implications for the work we do as human service professionals. I would like to explore how we can honor Indigenous children's rights through justice, cultural safety, and healing. Living in 100 Mile House, there's a large population of Indigenous families and children, and a lot of who I will be working with are those Indigenous families and children. So, being more prepared to understand where they're coming from a lot of the time is essential to not trying to sort of override what they feel and how they view things. For our second slide, we're going to be talking about what Jordan's Principle represents. And Jordan's Principle represents more than a policy. It's a matter of human dignity. It's about making sure First Nations children have equal access to health and social services. It ties into the broader context of colonial harm and also into the pathways of healing and empowerment that Indigenous communities continue to lead today. For me personally, as someone entering the human service field, this story reminds me that my role goes beyond service delivery. It's about advocacy, listening and standing in solidarity with Indigenous families. As a human service worker, it's going to be my responsibility to advocate for traditional healing methods if that's what the family wants, to advocate their needs if they feel that they can't in a Western healthcare system or mental health institution. To understand Jordan's Principle, we need to take a step back and look at Canada's colonial history. Indigenous people were displaced, their culture suppressed, and their children taken from them through systems like residential schools and the 60s Scoop. Even after these systems were formally dismantled, the federal and provincial governments still continued to argue over who was responsible for funding service for Indigenous children. This led to the heartbreaking story of Jordan River Anderson, a Cree boy from Norway House Cree Nation. Jordan had complex medical needs, but instead of going home, he stayed in a hospital for over 2 years while governments argued. He died at the age of 5 without ever having lived in his family home. His story became a symbol of systemic failure and eventually of commitment to do better. Jordan's Principle is now a legal rule that says no child should be denied access to public services because of jurisdictional disagreements. If a First Nation child needs help, whether it's healthcare, social support, or educational services, those needs must be met immediately. Disputes between governments are to be resolved later. This principle became national policy after a 2007 House of Commons motion and was eventually solidified by a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal decision in 2016. It's also named to honor Jordan, and it's a tool to prevent future tragedies from happening. Despite there being progress in Canada today, gaps still exist. Indigenous children often receive less funding and fewer services than their counterparts in Canada. Studies have shown that they face delays in medical treatment, special education supports, and mental health services. These inequities are not just bureaucratic, they are life-altering. Jurisdictional battles still pop up, and families sometimes have to fight for years to get what their children need. This creates trauma and contributes to ongoing mistrust in public systems. These gaps are symptoms of a deeper structural racism that still continues to shape the Indigenous experience in Canada. Although there's a a massive history of harm. Alongside that is a deep, resilient culture of healing. Indigenous communities lead their own solutions, using techniques and teachings passed down through generations. Empowerment often comes through cultural reconnection, through the use of the medicine wheel, traditional healing practices, land-based teachings, and the guidance of the elders. Healing circles, ceremonies like smudging, and language revitalization are all part of that process. These are not just alternative methods, they are essential, powerful ways of restoring identity and balance. As a future human service worker, we need to honor and support these approaches, not override them. It is essential that in working with Indigenous communities, we allow ourselves to be taught and to absorb this information rather than trying to take it over and put our own spin on it. As human service professionals, we play an active role in making sure Jordan's principle is upheld. That means understanding what it is, identifying when a child's rights are being overlooked, and stepping in to advocate. We must also build trust. That takes cultural humility, recognizing that we don't have all the answers with Western medicine, listening deeply, and creating safe spaces for Indigenous families to lead their own healing. We're not just service providers, we are allies. And sometimes we are witnesses to the harm that still occurs. But it is our job in working with Indigenous families to step up and be there to help them when they need it and how they need it. Learning about Jordan's principle was difficult. It's a heartbreaking story, and it made me angry. You had a child who needed help, who wasn't given help, because the government has all these different convoluted ideas about how things should go. It's absolutely unacceptable. It's opened my eyes to how policies can either reinforce colonial violence or begin to reverse it. I've come to understand that human service work isn't just emotional or practical, it's political. I want to be the kind of worker who pays attention to policies and speaks up when something isn't right. I want to center Indigenous voices and support trauma-informed, culturally grounded care. Jordan's story stays with me. It reminds me why this work matters. Jordan's principle is about fairness, but also about love. It reminds us that no child should be caught in political red tape. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action, number 3, asks all governments to fully implement Jordan's principle. That means it's our responsibility too. We must do more than learn. We must act. We must be the ones who listen to Indigenous families, who understand the impact of history, and who walk alongside communities in the spirit of justice and healing. These are my main sources that supported my presentation, including the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, and the TRC's final report. I encourage you to explore these resources if you want to learn more. And I would just like to thank you for listening to my presentation. I apologize if the duration of it isn't quite long enough. I really struggle with recording. But it being my final assignment of the course, I just really want to thank you and say that I've had a great time learning, and I've really enjoyed what I've learned. So thank you very much.